Wisconsin, as we go to the main straightaway. And Gary Gerald.
Paul, it seems only fitting that the focal point through so much of this season, the two second-generation drivers, 1 and 2 in the points chase, are side by side for this event today. Starting on the outside of row 3, Al Unser Jr. He is a man who, of course, has won 6 times this year for the Gallus-Craco team. Alongside second in points, a man who's won 4 times this year for the Newman-Haas team, Michael Andretti. 10 of 13 races won by the drivers in these 2 cars. Little Al would love to get the suspense and the anxiety out of the way. They'd like to wrap up the championship today. Michael and his team know that if they want to keep the title hopes alive, they really need to duplicate the victory in the rain a week ago at Mid-Ohio. There's anxiety, there's anticipation, there's determination on the part of the drivers and the crews as they await the command now to start engines.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Set and ready to go to accept the challenges of Road America. Hello and welcome to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. I'm Paul Page, and the air is nice, brisk, cool. Temperatures are down low. That means that we're going to have great carburation, great horsepower, as we're looking for a fight in the PPG IndyCar World Championship. And at the top of the order, Al Unser Jr. He's been there most of the season. If he is to win the championship, he can do so here today simply by staying ahead of his contenders. And that, of course, is Michael Andretti, second in the points, Bobby Rahal, or Rick Mears. Now, Derek Daly, you couldn't ask for a better course to contest a championship on.
Well, that's right. Road America is arguably the finest road racing layout in North America. 14 turns, 4 miles in length. But I think the calculator could be the most important piece of equipment in the pit lane today. Reason being, you haven't got the luxury here of missing your pit-in call. Now, under normal road racing circumstances, when your low fuel warning light comes on, past the pits or even in the first turn, you can usually make your way around. But 4 miles is a long track. If it comes on here, you may not make it around.
All right, let's take a look at the way they've lined up for the starting field. The starting grid is brought to you by the Die Hard battery, now with more power when you need it most. On the pole, Danny Sullivan, his 7th pole in the last 10 natural terrain road course events. And Rick Mears, his teammate, alongside. In the second row, it's Mario Andretti, the only 3-time IndyCar winner here. And Emerson Fittipaldi, the winner here in 1986 and 88. The third row, Michael Andretti, who ran out of fuel on the final lap while leading last year. And Al Unser Jr., who hopes to lock up the 1990 PPG Cup here this afternoon. The fourth row on the inside is Bobby Rahal, twice a runner-up here. And Teo Fabi, who finished second here last year. The fifth row on the inside is Arie Luyendyk, who began his IndyCar career here in 1984. And John Andretti. The sixth row on the inside is Eddie Cheever. Outside is Roberto Guerrero. His best finish on this course was fourth in 1986. The seventh row to the inside, Scott Brayton. His 2 best career IndyCar finishes have come on natural terrain road courses. And Mike Groff, the freshman from California. The eighth row on the inside is Dominic Dobson, making his first career start at Road America since 1986. And the outside is the young Canadian, Scott Goodyear. And we take a look down through the rest of the 25 cars that are scheduled to start here today. Danny Sullivan set a new track record at 131.289 miles an hour when he completed that qualification run. Now, a couple of cars had trouble getting started and pulling away from the grid itself. Jeff Wood, Michael Greenfield, and Dominic Dobson all had faltering engines. Dominic with the worst problem, but finally they were able to get him off and rolling. Here's the race, 50 laps around this circuit, 200 miles the distance, and $700,000 on the line. Danny Sullivan won it in the last mile last year here at Road America. And the weather here today in Wisconsin, well, it's brisk. Quite cool. The leaves are already starting to change. 50 degrees the temperature now. It shouldn't climb very much above that. Perhaps the most important of the winds, 15 to 25 miles an hour, and they are gusting, and that can very definitely have an effect on these very sensitive aerodynamic machines, Derek Daly.
can very much have an effect on these engines. They do run better in this cool conditions. However, with cool road temperatures, these tires do not grip as well. So we have advantages and disadvantages.
Looking back, the rear view, back to Michael Andretti from the back end of Mario Andretti's car as they come onto the pit straight and begin to climb the hill. Michael Andretti on the inside of the third row as the field now climbing the hill and anticipating a green flag. There's the front row. Danny Sullivan and Rick Mears leads the field down. The green flag is out, and they're racing. Sullivan jumps into the lead. Fittipaldi comes to the inside of Rick Mears as a fight for second place. And Mario Andretti fights with Al Unser Jr. through the first turn and down the hill.
The three Penske cars, there are 1, 2, 3 at the moment. We see Emerson make a nice move to take second place from Rick Mears.
And a sweeping maneuver by Michael Andretti as he comes across the track and tries to tuck in behind his father. Now traveling downhill, the second longest straightaway here. Danny Sullivan, followed by his teammate Fittipaldi. Rick Mears drops into third.
Just look at the gaggle of cars behind. People jostle for position. There's Rahal about to lose a place to Mario.
Michael Andretti gets badly bottled up. Looks like Michael in the number 3 car as you're looking back from Mario's car. Here comes Eddie Cheever up around Rahal.
Oh,
and they
look at the wheels.
Boy, they get the wheels together.
What a lot of action here so early in this race, but we saw Cheever slide down the inside of Rahal.
Down through Hurry Downs, you rode for a moment there with Michael Andretti. Cheever comes up to challenge. Now Lyondike comes up to challenge Rahal as well, and then the 2 Porsches as they head for the carousel.
A lot of room here at Road America. 4 miles in length. We're only just over halfway through this first lap. Already we've seen 4 or 5 passes, and we've seen wheels being banged together here.
Give you an idea just how important this specific race is. A critical race in the entire series. You mentioned it as 4 miles. We've got somebody with an engine going or something back there. Very far off. It looks like somebody may have just gotten off the edge of the course. We'll check that. You mentioned it, Derek Daly, is 4 miles. Some people may dispute that and say, wait a minute. I've raced there in the June sprints. It's 4.2. All depends on where you measure the circuit. And the measurement for CART is 4 miles around.
Well, that's right, and sometimes people term this as a 15 racetrack. In fact, we have counted 14 turns, which we'll use here to best describe it. But 14 or 15, it still is a fine, fine long racetrack. Look at Rahal come to the outside of Cheever.
Rahal comes up to challenge Cheever and Rick Mears right in front of Al Unser Jr. and Michael right there as well. Mears being challenged by Little Al now, and the fight for the championship itself is just behind him. Michael Andretti apparently wanting to make the move as early as possible. Cheever has come from 11th to 7th place in a single lap. You saw him on his move. Now downhill and through the woods.
The 2 Marlboro cars begin to pull away, but look at Michael Andretti.
Michael looks everywhere as they come under heavy braking into station 5, turn number 3. As he tries to get around, almost drops a rear wheel off. They come up. This next corner is blind to the left.
Remember, Michael must beat Al Jr. to realistically retain a chance of winning the championship this year. Al Jr. is a very, very difficult man to pass because he knows how to protect his line entering corners.
Well, Michael Andretti now chases Al Unser Jr. in what is the fight for the championship. A fight for 4th place on the circuit. Michael really is in the best psychological position because all he has to do is push Little Al as hard as he can and try to get around him. And that will ruin Little Al's chances to do any good here today, as the fight right up behind Rick Mears right now as they head out of the gravel pit and down toward Canada Corner. Michael makes a move again, trying to get underneath. Al Unser Jr. can't do it, but look how close that fight is taking them to Rick Mears.
Michael is very determined. He needs this position. Al Jr. will know exactly where he is all the time. Again, we saw him protect that position. Al Jr. was in the middle of the road. Not enough room for Michael to slide down the inside. Look, he slides on the outside here, gets off the track onto the rumble strips.
They climb the hill on the pit straight once again. Michael takes a look to the inside, lines up. They'll touch 190 miles an hour through here.
Al Jr. seems to have good speed down these straights. Under braking, at times we see Michael close up right here. Under braking, gets right down underneath the wing of Al Unser Jr.'s car.
Michael comes into turn 2 just a little bit hotter. Now they start downhill, and because of the woods on either side here, their aerodynamics are a little more efficient. And look at Michael once again as he goes for every position he can. Unser Jr. tries to protect the line. Michael's alongside as they come down into Station 5, and Michael gets ahead of Little Al. The fight for the championship continues.
Very, very brave move by Michael Andretti. Now remember, Al Jr., he's entitled to take the line he likes. He moved down to the inside, to the middle of the road, made Michael work hard. Go around the outside if you want my position. Michael said, I will, and he did. A very, very brave move.
So Michael Andretti moves up into 4th place, and that, for the moment at least, spoils Al Unser Jr.'s chance for a championship here. Danny Sullivan leads it at Road America. We'll be back. At Road America, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. Everybody's watching the fight for the championship. The Texaco Haviland 200, the Indy cars of CART. And today it's brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. By Toyota dealers and their quality line of cars and trucks. Toyota, I love what you do for me. And by Goodyear Eagle Radials, the best-selling performance radials in the world. Back on board with Al Unser Jr., who rides in 5th place right now. Danny Sullivan leads this field, followed by his teammates, Emerson Fittipaldi and Rick Mears. You saw Michael Andretti as he was able to get around Al Unser Jr., and as you take a look from the onboard camera, as they climb the hill, making the left hand, turning into Hurry Downs, you can see that Michael Andretti has managed to pull away and is now moving into position to challenge Rick Mears.
I think we saw the move we saw from Michael as we watched Danny Sullivan here clearly in the lead, but Emerson Fittipaldi in the 2nd Penske Marlboro car is shadowing his every move. Down through the carousel here, we see Sullivan, the clear leader, winner here last year, one of his favorite racetracks, but he does have a nice clear lead. I was saying earlier on about Michael, the type of move we saw was typical of his aggressive and flamboyant driving style.
You were talking before we started, since we have Penske cars running 1, 2, and 3, you were looking at the tracings, the graphs of each of these 3 cars, and they drive the course differently.
The new computer technology that we have now measuring every movement of these race cars during qualifying, what Penske's can do is they get a graph of the lap speeds through every corner and every straight on each of their drivers. Then they can overlay those graphs and they can clearly see where the drivers are quicker or slower. And it is fascinating just to see how much quicker Mears is than Sullivan in some areas, but then Sullivan so much quicker in other areas. It's fascinating.
This is the fight for 3rd place as Michael Andretti, after dispatching Al Unser Jr., moves up to challenge Rick Mears, who has been one of the fastest on that long straightaway. Rick and Michael both make the turn in. Now they have another long straightaway run. This, of course, was where Michael Andretti made his move on Al Unser Jr. He's going to try the same thing on Rick Mears. They come down the hill, through the woods. Michael Andretti challenging Rick Mears.
And Rick takes the inside, makes Michael go to the outside, but Michael doubles back down the inside.
Rick sweeps across the front, takes Michael climbing the hill. So the gamble that worked with Al Unser Jr. didn't work with Rick Mears. The fight continues for 3rd place. Let's go down to the pits and report from Gary Gerald.
Well, just moments ago, Teo Fabi was reported that he may have lost a wheel nut on the course. He got off the circuit, came to the pits. Teo immediately unhooked the wheel, slammed it down, jumped out of the car, disappeared over our shoulder back to the Porsche trailers. I have never seen Teo Fabi show as much emotion and frustration. There is damage now to the suspension as a result of that excursion off the course. It's been such a tough season for the Porsche team. As we go down pit road now to our colleague Lynn St. James.
The pits are going to play a very important role today because there was a change made just today at Road America. They added a chicane to the pit lane to slow the cars down for safety reasons. There will be a stop and go penalty if a car does not go through that chicane. The Andrettis are in pit number 1 and number 2, and that's a distinct advantage for the 3 predicted pit stops.
Thank you, Lynn. For those of you that are familiar with this magnificent circuit, as we continue to watch Michael Andretti challenging Rick Mears, as they climb the straightaway, you may notice the absence of the old pagoda. Yes, there have been some substantive changes here at Road America. A whole new pit area. They've taken down the old pagoda, and there are many more changes planned yet. We'll have a fuller update on that just a little bit later. But Rick Mears tries to hold off a charging Michael Andretti. And once again, Rick's superior speed on the long straightaway seems to pay off. But here is where Michael seems to be best.
You mentioned superior speed. Rick Mears was the fastest car all through the weekend on the front straight past the pits here with a high speed of 192 miles an hour. Now, on a road circuit, that is extremely fast. That's why Michael makes his moves under braking rather than at the end of the straights.
Of course, we're talking, when we talk the pit straight at Road America, the longest straightaway that the Indy cars use at any time in the series. Report coming in from the circuit now that Mario Andretti has only 40 inches of boost, so he's not getting the power into the engine that everyone else is, and that's going to cost him.
A very, very frustrating situation for Mario in particular. We saw him have such an excellent run at Mid-Ohio, but now he crawls all over the back of Eddie Cheever, but he does not have the horsepower probably to stay with Cheever down the long straight. Mind you, he's not doing a bad job now with 40 inches.
Cheever currently has 6th place. Mario has dropped from 3rd back into 7th, and of course Lyondike and there's John Andretti lined up to challenge Mario just any time they can. So at the front of the field, it remains Danny Sullivan, who is about a second running in front of Emerson Fittipaldi, and Rick Mears and Michael Andretti have started to close down on the lead of this race. A race that throughout the afternoon should prove most fascinating because, as Derek Daly pointed out, look at there, Michael Andretti just got around Rick Mears. As Derek Daly pointed out, you have to be very careful about your pit stop. If you get it wrong, you're probably going to end up rolling to a stop on the side of this course. This is when Michael came up to challenge Rick Mears at Canada Corner, and Michael, just under braking, was able to drop it inside Rick, move past, and pick up 3rd place. So it is now Danny Sullivan, his teammate Emerson Fittipaldi. There is Michael Andretti, Rick Mears, and Al Unser Jr. The fight continues at Road America in the Texaco Haviland 200. We'll be back. We're back just outside of Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin at Road America. Danny Sullivan leads it. There is Emerson Fittipaldi in 2nd. 3rd is Michael Andretti. Rick Mears runs in 4th place, and Al Unser Jr. back, I'm sure, where he would prefer not to be, running in 5th place right now. Mario Andretti, he has his problems, apparently not getting full boost into the engine. He's been dropping steadily backwards now. He continues to maintain position just behind Eddie Cheever, running back in 8th place right now. Here's the fight at the front of the field as Fittipaldi closes up, ready to challenge Danny Sullivan.
Emerson Fittipaldi is running a close 2nd. Remember, Emerson has not enjoyed the type of success that he had last year, which I'm sure he expected from the Penske organization, but they have not quite got their act together as they would want here. Road racing, this is the first time for a long time we've seen 2 Penskes on the front row of the grid. The Lola chassis really has dominated this year so far, so Roger Penske anxious to put his name and his mark and his car back up at number 1.
This looks back, John Andretti. Take a look at the Porsche as he touches wheels and gets off the course as he touched with Scott Goodyear in number 11. And when you get off into the gravel, of course, it's not like we saw it when we were at Mid-Ohio where the gravel was also wet. But you can see the course marshals are there. That was a battle, by the way, for Scott Goodyear's perennial battle for 10th place. He seems to get that position and stay there. He's doing a magnificent job this year. At the front of the field again, it is Sullivan, followed by Fittipaldi. There goes the number 1 of Emerson Fittipaldi pass as they come out of the gravel pit and head for the corner called the Kink. The thing I like about Road America is, like so many European courses, they name the corners here, Darren.
Well, that's right. It can be so much easier to name it, like Canada Corner, etc., the carousel, rather than numbers. I think a name is far better. But here's Canada Corner right here with Sullivan using all the road. Look at that rear wheel just about slip off the edge of the road onto the curbing. But Sullivan still holding off Emerson. Emerson running a very good, strong 2nd. Both Marlboro cars.
So Danny Sullivan is averaging 125.3 miles an hour thus far in the race with 8 laps complete. We asked Danny, with the distraction of next year, have you lost any focus on this season?
You know, so far I've been able to focus pretty well. Of course, this happened right before Denver, so I've been able to focus pretty well. I've had 2 seconds and a 5th, and you know, we've been up there in the qualifying. So hopefully we can keep going and win some races. Everything support-wise within Penske's is tremendous. You know, guys, everybody, there's not a problem, and it never has been there. So you just got to keep doing your job.
Danny Sullivan still leads it, but Emerson Fittipaldi closes in now. Derek Daly, we have to consider the motivation of the two men running at the front. Danny Sullivan, who searches for a ride for next year, and his name seems to be mentioned with almost any car that you bring up. So part of what he would like to do is get a position in which he can argue his wages a little bit more efficiently, and he can do that with a win. Let's go for an update. Here's Gary Gerald.
While we check in down here on the Danny Sullivan, the Penske pit, we look over our shoulder. John Favor is one of the engineers that Danny Sullivan specifically credited with his victory last year. Favor and company told him repeatedly, you must conserve fuel, you must go slow, and it resulted in the victory when Andretti ran out of fuel. The telemetry equipment is right down here. Obviously, they won't let us show you the screen to see the data, but already they're indicating that their fuel consumption is right where they want it to be. This Penske team at the moment, very, very happy as they try to make it 2 in a row.
And as we have suggested, fuel a critical factor at Road America because of the tremendous length of the circuit here at 4 miles. If you don't make your pit stop dead on the money, and if you don't have your fuel calculated right, just like Michael Andretti last year, you can be leading to the last mile and suddenly be without fuel to take you to the checkered flag.
Just to follow up a little bit on the telemetry that Gary just mentioned, the screen they're looking at actually tells them the temperature that engine is running at, the oil pressure that engine has, and the amount of fuel that engine is using. So every piece of information that they need to know about the engine is right up there on the TV screen in the pit lane.
Well, 9 laps are complete. Danny Sullivan followed by Fittipaldi, then Michael Andretti. But Michael is closing down on Fittipaldi at 0.5 of a second a lap. We'll be back with more from Elkhart Lake. Back at Road America, and in a surprise move on lap number 14, Al Unser Jr. comes into the pits. The Gallus-Craco organization going to work on the car. They make a change to the front wings on the machine, and in 14.5 seconds, he rolls back into the fight. But Derek Daly, tactically, what have they done here? Didn't they just make it a 3-stop race?
I believe they did. That was a surprise move to us. Now, we did see them make an adjustment to the front wings of Al Jr.'s car. Remember, he was following Mears. He was not able to get by him. Perhaps he decided, rather than waste time on the racetrack, if it was going to be three stops, he'd dive in, get fuel, make an adjustment, and now run faster on the racetrack.
Most of the teams agree you would like to make it to the 16th lap before you come in for fuel and tires here, making it 2 pit stops in the total 50-lap distance. But Al Unser Jr. surprisingly dropped off the battle and picked out his pit, came in, changed tires, changed aerodynamics, and refueled. Now you can see Rick Mears is closing down on his teammate Emerson Fittipaldi, who runs in 3rd place. As they approach Canada Corner, Mears darts out into clean air, takes a look, decides this is not the place to pass. But as they begin to climb the hill once again, will Mears make his move in the fastest point for him on the course, which is the main stretch? Or will they decide at Penske that this is the time to bring their cars in? It's a critical point in the race for all of these competitors.
Here's an unusual situation we see here with Fittipaldi. At the start of the race, we saw him make an excellent start, run right to the front and chase Sullivan. He stayed there for a while. Now this handling characteristic of this car must be changing. He's slowly dropping back. Now back into the clutches of Rick Mears. Rick Mears looks as if he's a man on a mission about to take Fittipaldi's place.
So here comes Fittipaldi down over the top of the hill. Some of the pit stops already beginning as Dean Hall, not in contention at the top of the field, makes his stop. And this is an apprehensive lap for all of the drivers at the front because they're attempting to stretch fuel just as far as they can. Over on pit road already, there's the Newman Haas team ready for Michael Andretti.
We do remember from last year, the winner made 3 stops. We remember Sullivan did stop for a splash. Maybe a lot of the teams have already decided it's going to be 3 stops.
But a splash was just exactly what it was for Sullivan. I don't think he was in the pits much more than 6 seconds last year, just enough to pick up fuel to make it the final lap to the finish.
The problem with aggressive driving, as we see from Michael, the harder you drive these cars, the more fuel you use. So he has a touch-and-go situation here because he needs to catch Sullivan. We know he wants to win the race. He has to maintain one eye on that fuel counter, on that fuel meter, because if he uses too much fuel, all that we see now is all in vain.
On board with Michael Andretti, Danny Sullivan is just 3 seconds ahead. And if the plan is played the way it is planned, then Michael Andretti and Danny Sullivan both should head for the pits on this particular lap. You saw the crew beginning to lay out, and there goes Michael running for the pits right now. So Michael comes over the top of the hill, works his way down through that chicane, and Lynn St. James is waiting for his arrival.
Michael Andretti enters this pit on the exact 16th lap completion, exactly on schedule. This is a very critical pit stop that they get the full load of fuel so that they have their full amount of the allocated 119 gallons for the entire race. Perfect pit stop. Down to you, Gary.
And Danny Sullivan up and down off the jacks. He's rolling 15 seconds. Fittipaldi is in. Fittipaldi's crew tells us he's not getting the fuel mileage that Sullivan got early. We swing over to the opposite pit. Emerson looks to be routine as he gets away. A pair of Penske cars, and Immo headed sideways, and Rick Mears also rolls out. Everybody pitting at the same time, Paul.
So everyone at the front of the field comes in for a stop as Mears tucks in behind Fittipaldi. Michael Andretti won the battle in the stops and was able to get out just ahead of Danny Sullivan. You're on board with Michael now. Now that brings to mind, Eric Daly, they put this chicane in because of the newer, wider, faster pits, but they never got a chance to practice with it. Michael Andretti had one of the first pits there, so he may have had a better exit, and I wonder how much that figures into this fight.
We saw Michael come all the way down the pit lane and go through that chicane. To me, it looked as if he almost came sliding through that chicane, but whatever happened from the time he got off the racetrack to back on, their crew got Michael in and out much faster than Sullivan. He went from second place to first. So cheers for the crew of Michael Andretti, because they now put him in the lead.
So advantage Michael Andretti right now, and Al Unser Jr. is struggling back in 6th place. Not the day that he would like to have seen, because if he could finish in front of Michael Andretti, in front of Bobby Rahal, in front of Rick Mears, he could have wrapped up a championship here today. And as you've already noticed, there have been some tremendous changes here at Road America. Yellow flags flying here. Let's just make sure we know what it is. Nothing critical on the race course. Probably still trying to get one car out of the gravel pit down at the end. We've mentioned changes on this track, and there have been a number of them as Road America continues to improve. The off-season, one of significant change here. Gary Gerald examines one of the areas of major improvement. This track fact is brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. Now, here's Gary Gerald.
In years past here at Road America, this was the pit area for the Indy cars, and it was a bit primitive to say the least. Because of the slope of the hill, you had to try to level your fuel tanks. Because of the rocks and the mud and debris, it was difficult to move tool chests and other pieces of equipment. And when it rained, it could get downright miserable here in the pits. But this year, there's a brand new look at Road America. The pits have been totally relocated. They've been asphalted. There's a pad here that's 200 feet deep and 1,200 feet long. Each of the individual pits, 36 feet in length. And pit road itself, wider than the racetrack. In every pit, you'll find one of these boxes. AC for power. There's water right here. There's even jacks for telephone and fax machines. And if you want to get a video feed, no problem. Every 6th pit, you'll find a direct link to race control. And even better, as far as the crews are concerned, you turn around in the pits, and right here, not 20 yards away, room for their transporters and all of their spare equipment. It's a marvelous facelift and a welcome new look at Road America.
Wisconsin, the Indy cars have cart in the Texaco Haviland 200. Michael Andretti leads it. Second place is Danny Sullivan. Al Unser Jr. with the stops picked up an advantage, moved up to 3rd place. Emerson Fittipaldi has fallen back to 4th, and Rick Mears now runs in 5th position. We ride on board with Michael Andretti as he circles this giant and most magnificent facility.
This is Michael now coming up past the front straight, up through the gears on the right side. Along the pit wall there, he can pick out his pit board, gets the information that he needs. Now the engine is at about 12,000 RPM. Makes one down change, goes from 5th to 3rd, so he skips a gear. Now back up to 4th, back to 5th. One gear change, down to 2nd. He goes from 5th to 2nd. Back up through the gearbox, revs it to 12,000 RPM. Now listen to that engine scream. 180 miles an hour he does down here. This is where he passed Al Jr., went round the outside. Let's listen to him braking. Again, we saw one gear change. He goes from 5th to 2nd. You hear that missed gear? He's back in 2nd gear. This is one of the slower corners. It's a very fast 4th gear kink right here. Accelerates down 130 miles an hour. Again, he makes one down change. This is 2nd gear. We go to 3rd and 4th. He's having trouble with that gearbox. 135 miles an hour through the carousel right here. Takes 5th gear. Now this is the kink. 160 miles an hour through here. Right there. Touches the curb. Uses all the road. This is what they call the backstretch. Very often the fastest part of the racetrack. 192 miles an hour here. This is where he passed Rick Mears. Under braking here. This is Canada corner. 2nd gear again. 12,000 RPM he uses all the time. Now he comes to finish the turn. This is turn 14. 3rd gear. And away he goes again, another lap. Michael leading here, but we did hear one missed gear change.
We heard one that you said is a miss, another where it went in a little rough. You suggested there may be a problem with this gearbox. Is that in fact true?
It could be true. We definitely hear something that is not a clear gear change. We will listen for that later on, but very often these things happen so fast that the driver doesn't have time to think about it. It's just instinctive. He just yanks it back to where the gear shift should be.
So you've taken a lap around Road America as Dominic Dobson comes off the course. That's down at Station 5. Very easy to get off there, overcook the brakes. Remember, Dominic had trouble on the start of this race. It took them some time to get the engine started. He'd moved up and was running at the back end of the top 10, actually in 11th place, right behind Eddie Cheever. And then suddenly off the course, the engine not fired at the moment, and the course marshals try to get him pointed, so they'll try to give him a push start. On a day like this, it might be a little bit easier to get that engine started if it doesn't have the same problem it did when they tried to start it for the race. And there comes Al Unser Jr., 3rd place as he moves past with Emerson Fittipaldi lined up behind him. Al Unser Jr. is trying to catch Danny Sullivan. At the same time, Sullivan is trying to catch Michael Andretti, the leader of the race. You're on board with Al Unser Jr. because Sullivan would like to use Michael's draft, that is the vacuum area behind the car, to help pull him along and thereby conserve fuel. But we take a look at 3rd place Al Unser Jr., who if he finished right now in this position would have the overall points lead and win the championship. But the way things are going, he'd really like to get around Michael Andretti. That's Shelley Unser. You can see she's all bundled up. It's brisk up at the top of the pit straight here. Let's get this update from Gary Gerald.
And Paul, in the Unser pit, just an update on that 14-lap stop. He came in by design. We checked with Rick Gallis. That's the team strategy. They plan to make it a 3-stop race. His teammate, Bobby Rahal, stopped at 16 along with most of the other front runners. So they're planning a 2-stop race if all goes well. Also, there was a wing adjustment for Little Al, and they say they're getting a little better grip, a little better handle on the racetrack right now. They seem to be happy running in 3rd place.
You caught a glimpse there, too. They're still trying to get John Andretti and the Porsche unstuck from Canada corner. They're having some problems with that. We continue to watch Al Unser Jr. as he works his way down to the first turn, past those brand new pits, which everybody seems most satisfied with. Transporters backed right up to the pits. It's very convenient here now.
You mentioned John Andretti trying to get out of that gravel trap. The reason they put them in there is because they need to suck up the car, stop them hitting the racetrack or the guardrail. Of course, when it does do that, it's very, very difficult to move the car. Hence, they're still down there trying to get him free.
So at Road America, with now 21 laps complete, it's Michael Andretti who is out in front. The Newman Haas crew very pleased with that. Danny Sullivan, the pole sitter, lies in 2nd. We'll be back with more. Back at Road America, the bright yellow Pennzoil number 2 of Rick Mears, his last year with those livery colors, as the Pennzoil sponsorship will go elsewhere over to the Jim Hall VDS team, as yet unannounced in their driver. And Rick's car will look very much like that one right there, because he and Fittipaldi will be the 2 teammates at Penske and both carrying the Marlboro colors. Rick Mears now, though, challenging his teammate in a battle for 4th place.
This is the battle we saw before the pit stops, so everything was evened out on the Penske pit stops. They didn't lose or gain time on each other. Look at Rick slide up under Emerson's rear wing. Rick very, very late on the brakes there, so Emerson's going to have to be careful here.
In this race, as in every kart race that Goodyear sponsors on ESPN, Goodyear will be sending a check for $1,000 to CARA, the Championship Auto Racing Auxiliary, and all of their fine charitable contributions. Fittipaldi, car number 1, denoting the national champion, the PPG champion, but a champion without a victory this year. A man who would really like to have a victory. In fact, many of us would have thought it was a shoo-in. Penske, the talk of the great super team this year, but it also seems that every time the media gets a hold of the expression super team, it's a death knell to the organization that receives it. In fact, I can remember when Gordon Johncock was given a number 1 as a champion, and he decided, no, I don't want that number at all. It's not lucky.
We're watching Rick. He shadows Emerson. He does close up under braking. Now, we mentioned earlier on that Rick was the fastest car all weekend down the straight here. Interesting, Fittipaldi was the second fastest, so they both have the 2 fastest cars down the straights, the long straights here at Elkhart Lake.
Rick Mears continues to chase his teammate Emerson Fittipaldi and chase Al Unser Jr. in the points fight. We ask him, with the points lead little Al has, are you and the other drivers envious?
I'd say not really envious. I mean, obviously you'd like to have that success yourself, you know, in your team to have it. But, you know, it's good to, especially like Al, you know, which has not won a championship yet. And, you know, that's tremendous, and it's exciting. You know, I think a lot of people are excited for him if he would happen to win it. But, you know, we're basically, I guess you're envious of anybody that wins the race, period.
3-time PPG IndyCar World Series champion Rick Mears. He continues to work in 5th place and work at the back of his teammate's car, Emerson Fittipaldi. And if they finished as they were running right now, Al Unser Jr. would lead in the points fight by 39 points, but the fight most definitely would go on to Nazareth in 2 weeks. There are 2 races left, so a total of 44 points available at the top of the field. As we take a look through the rundown at 20 laps, we're actually in the 23rd lap right now, with Mears still chasing Fittipaldi.
You see Cheever lost some time during the pit stops. He's now running in 10th place. We're back here with Eddie Cheever. That's Raoul Boesel and the Judd engine Lola being run by True Sports. A development year for the Judd car and the True Sports car, because they want to build their own All-American car for next year's IndyCar Series.
The battle is for 10th place, and of course they're well along in that effort. Steve Horn and the True Sports organization, they put together, along with the university there in Columbus, a nice wind tunnel effort. They gave members of the media a glimpse of that. The question, though, that seems unanswered is, what about the cockpit? Right now it's Raoul Boesel, but he's a replacement for Scott Pruitt, who's here at Road America looking terribly fit and hoping to be back in an IndyCar very soon. So Raoul Boesel is also one of those who will be looking for a ride for the 1991 season. Though there has been some talk of 2 cars at True Sports, that would certainly speed up the development process if they were to do that. Though Raoul Boesel's name has not been mentioned in that second car. More often than not, we hear maybe there's an opportunity for Paul Tracy there.
Paul Tracy will test with True Sports next Tuesday, 2 days from now. Here's Michael, as usual, using all the track and some of the road that isn't there. But Michael catching this battle between Cheever and Boesel. We're back now inside Michael's car, a driver's eye view again. We see the little pad he has on the right side of the cockpit. What that is that is a crushable sponge material. In the event of an impact from a backwards impact, it stops the helmet striking the carbon fiber of the tub too hard. It absorbs the impact instead of the impact going into the helmet and sometimes into the driver's head.
And the fight continues for 4th place between Fittipaldi and Mears. We mentioned Paul Tracy. He, by the way, was the winner of the ARS race. A tremendous season that the newly crowned ARS champion is having. Paul Tracy with another win. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
all in the Emerson Fittipaldi pit over our shoulder. John Favor, who's been running the telemetry for Danny Sullivan, has been called over by Teddy Meyer and Rick Reineman and the company and is checking the telemetry here for Emerson Fittipaldi. For some reason, Emerson is not getting the same fuel mileage that Sullivan is getting. That's the information that we are receiving. So they're consulting. They're trying to figure out and confirm if, in fact, he's not getting as good mileage, and then try to determine why. Because if he's not getting as good mileage, they've got to slow Emerson down. So our first real indication of how this fuel crunch always surfaces at Elkhart right here in front of us.
So often fuel has played in the finish here at Road America. Tremendously long circuit, no room for error whatsoever. Danny Sullivan, by the way, is slowly closing in on Michael Andretti for the lead. Not yet in contact, still about 2 seconds back. But Fittipaldi is most definitely following this man as Michael Andretti moves around the number 8 Budweiser car of Raul Boisel as they head down into Station 5 again. And Michael is now very carefully working his way through traffic. That's Eddie Cheever that lies just ahead.
Michael's favorite way to make the move, dive down the inside, jump on those brakes. A little bit later, we saw him use all the road again, just knock those rear wheels off again. But Michael, now up behind Cheever, needs to get by Cheever, because remember, in traffic, if you have to back off a little bit, Sullivan can gain hand over fist.
Momentum, so important on an oval, is also critically important here, especially during a section like this. This is the carousel, where you want to keep the car rolling as fast as you can and not lose any speed at all, because you're coming into another very fast section of the course, heading down off of the gravel pit into the kink and toward Canada Corner.
That carousel was a graphic description of just how much better Michael's car handles over Cheever. Look at Danny Sullivan, though, trying to get through this traffic. Sullivan catches him.
Car well off the course and over the mound. We don't have an identity yet. Fire back, and looks like an engine turbocharger fire, though, as we can see just the tip of the helmet, and that's A.J. Foyt. And A.J., there are the course marshals there in the car but moving. We'll keep track of this, and you can get an idea how isolated that might be. And here comes Michael Andretti through the chicane, lap 26 into the pits. Lynn St. James is there.
Michael makes his second pit stop, second of a scheduled 3. It's a little bit earlier than most of the other teams, but they said it's within the window that most teams are going to have to make 3 stops anyway, so they're going to get it in early. They're making sure they get all that valuable fuel in, and Michael's out of the pits. A wonderful pit stop.
Oh, what a pit stop. 12.3 seconds. A brilliant stop for the Newman Haas organization, and Michael rolls back underway. So Michael Andretti comes in. There's no question about it now. After last year's experience of losing in the last mile, they're making it a 3-stop race as the crew's working at A.J. Foyt's car. The kart safety team is there, and we'll keep track of this situation as well. He just came right off the end of the very first corner. So A.J. Foyt off the course. They have yellows only standing in that area of the circuit. The safety crew is there, and Michael Andretti leads here at Road America. We'll be back with more right after this. Back at Road America, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, the Texaco Haviland 200. I'm Paul Page with Derek Daly, Gary Gerald, and Lynn St. James. And you're watching from Michael Andretti's camera, and as he works his way around the track, you will notice that there is a yellow flag at every corner station. That is because of A.J. Foyt's accident. The officials of CART have decided, because of this situation, they don't want to take any chances. They're still working at the car with A.J. That's the CART safety team. And they're going full course yellow so that they can get the field under control. Now, that'll take some time to bring this field up. And Michael Andretti, who hit the pits just before this full course yellow, has now lost. Look, to bring out the jaws of life. So they're working with a serious situation down there with A.J. Foyt. He apparently just skipped right over that gravel pit.
The great thing about the gravel traps is they do catch the cars unless you go straight into them. Then you can actually get right through the gravel trap, which is what we saw happen to Foyt. If the car gets anyway sideways, it immediately sucks in the wheels. But Foyt obviously hit that straight on and went out over the other end of it.
The good news was that we saw A.J. moving in the cockpit. I saw his hand raised in the air at one point right after the impact. So we'll continue to monitor that situation. Our information will come directly from the CART safety team, and as soon as they're done with the situation, they'll relay to us and we'll relay to you. On board with Al Unser Jr. Now, with the pit stops, the pit stop of Michael Andretti coming where it did, it gave the advantage back to Al Unser Jr. and the new leader of the race now, Danny Sullivan, who got into the lead when Michael Andretti went into the pits. That would have been a fine tactic had not this full course yellow occurred. So Danny Sullivan now has the lead. Al Unser Jr. is in second place. Rick Mears is in third, and Michael Andretti's dropped back to fourth. So Al Unser Jr., as he comes to the pit lane, accelerates. His pit is all the way down at the far end. He negotiates through the chicane here. That's a new section for this track. Running through the old pits, and he rolls toward Gary Gerald. Gary?
Well, Paul, we understand part of the problem may be one of communication and a faulty radio. Rick Gallus swapped radios with one of the crew members to get word to Al. Here he is now. He went flying through the first time at literally full speed on pit road and didn't make the stop. Everybody was baffled. Now he gets the routine service, still on the jacks now as we watch, and they get the fresh rubber on. All that precious fuel. Now he's rolling. It's just about 14.5 seconds on our clocks after some confusion. Now we'll try to update as we get time the situation regarding communication and his radio.
Al Unser Jr. makes his second stop of the day during the first full course caution that they've had here since 1986 at Road America, and he's able to pull right back up behind the gathered up field rather quickly. Danny Sullivan is still at the front of this field running under the full course caution. Second, of course, is Al Unser Jr. Rick Mears is in third place. In fourth place is Michael Andretti, and Emerson Fittipaldi is lined up in fifth position. We'll be back. Well, there's bratwurst and roasting ears of corn being cooked up at the top of that hill here at Road America, the most scenic race course in Wisconsin. From Road America at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, coverage of the Texaco Haviland 200 continues. Brought to you by Busch Beer. Head for the mountains of Busch. By Nissan, built for the human race. And by Firestone, tires that meet the test. Well, still under a full course caution with Danny Sullivan at the front of the field. And we look down through the order under this full course caution now. The PG pace cars are out, the pace car singular, and it will gather up the field, and we will update you on A.J. Foyt just as soon as we have any information. You're on board with Al Unser Jr., and as he pulls one of the tearaways off of his helmet, under the heading of what might have been a couple of years ago, Roy Winkleman said he was going to come to the Indy cars with a Lotus. And Al Unser Jr. was scheduled to be the driver. Now, that never happened, but we're hearing that that Winkleman is, in fact, coming back. He's asked for some documents for next year with CART.
That project that he was to put together with Lotus was probably one of the most exciting new projects that would have hit the tracks in IndyCar racing. The car was actually to be built by Lotus in England. It was constructed. It was a real car, engine, everything, a full package, ready to go. It sat in the shops over in England. The finance, or whatever happened, did not come together. In fact, I believe that was the first of the all-carbon fiber monocoques.
Exactly.
That was the problem, I believe, in debuting that car, because that was technically illegal at the time in CART, but no longer is, as we know from the ruling for next year.
Well, in fact, wrong up through this year, and they say that that is, in fact, what has affected Porsche's situation. They had an all-carbon fiber coming into the season, and then they said, nope, you can't run that, and that put them behind the timeline a bit. Now let's get some further updates as we watch Al Unser Jr., the Valvoline car number 5, work around this circuit. Here's Gary Gerald.
Paul, interesting on the last stop. There is a radio problem. Al cannot hear his crew. The crew can hear Al. He can't hear the crew. But of more importance, you see this wet spot down here on the track. They spilled fuel. We couldn't see it from our vantage point. We can't tell you how much, but every drop is precious here. Of course, they're very concerned. This is where the full course yellow is helping them now. Let's check in further on pit road with Lynn St. James.
Another help here is the fact that the full course yellow has provided the opportunity for Mario Andretti's team to try to change the pop-off valve. They're still trying to do something to get that boost back in the turbo of that Chevy-powered car. So they're taking advantage of this long full course yellow.
So they have the calling off of Mario Andretti's car and are effecting repairs there, which might get Mario back into this fight. He's still running up in the top 10, running in 8th place, despite this rather long stop in the pits. The crew itself wondering whether or not they ought not to shut the engine off while they're working on that car. There's Mario. He stays in the cockpit, and the Newman Haas team works frantically at the back of the car. And now they decide that it's time to shut that thing down so they can do some work on it without having to worry about whirring parts there. So as we continue to watch under the full course caution, the twin yellow flags fly at the start-finish line, and Mario Andretti sits in the pits. Now take a look here as we watch Al Unser Jr. circle around. It's a relatively comfortable ride right here. Driving a race car fast, though, requires a great deal more than nerves of steel. Lynn St. James takes a look at the physical aspect of driving.
There's a prevailing myth that race car drivers just go fast, but they're not athletes. Well, I can tell you that's definitely not the case. I'm sitting here on an exercise bicycle to elevate my heart rate. The Motorsports Research Group has been testing race car drivers for over 8 years, and they've monitored the heart rate of drivers while they're driving a race and have proven that we maintain between 140 and 180 beats per minute the entire time we're in the race car. Now that can be well over 2 hours. The only other athlete that maintains that type of cardiovascular fitness level while they're performing their sport are marathon runners, and they're truly athletes. Now you add the heat, you add the mental energy, and the amount of G-forces, that car is beating you up. And then you've got to steer it. Now it's not like steering your car at home with power steering. You turn the wheel, the car turns. How about taking 2 10-pound weights, put them up there, and you do that for about 2 hours, and let me tell you, you've had a real workout. So while you're watching those Indy cars go around the racetrack, the drivers in there are not just drivers. Remember, they're athletes as well.
A very fit Lynn St. James, but so is this man, Michael Andretti. In fact, he went on a full program after he suffered some ill effects from his first win at the Michigan 500, was almost totally exhausted. Danny Sullivan leads this field under a full course caution. We're back and still under a full course caution. Danny Sullivan under the full course is the leader. Rick Mears is second. Michael Andretti rides in third. Then Fittipaldi, then Bobby Rahal, and then this man, Al Unser Jr. Let's go to the pits, get an update on Mario Andretti's situation. Here's Lynn St. James.
I'm with Carl Dean, the crew chief for Mario Andretti's car. Carl, we know that Mario's had boost problems for this entire race. Were you able to repair that and get him back where he's running full boost?
Yeah, we had a wastegate line on the left-hand side come loose. So we fixed it during this yellow, and so he should have all his boost back.
Well, he's still running very well in the top 10, so he might have a good last part of the race.
He's got a lot of better chance now than he had.
Right, thanks.
So Mario Andretti comes back on the track after a pit stop of 1 minute and 31 seconds, and he did not lose a lap. So they did a marvelous job. Not a pop-off valve change as first suggested, but the line on the wastegate tightened up, not leaking any longer, and that should give Mario Andretti full power. He's in 9th place. He's definitely a man to watch as he tries to catch up the rest of the field. He's getting a good test of whether or not it's full power right now.
The great thing about a full course yellow, if you are in trouble, you can stop and have the work done. While you sit still, you don't lose that much because the pace car only has these cars running at about 60 to 70 miles an hour. So what you do lose is your place in the series of cars. So all you do is get the repairs done, which we saw him, and he goes to the back of the line. But now remember, he can easily pass some of these backmarker cars and very quickly become competitive again.
So Mario Andretti tucks in at the back. Let's take a look back through the field. Here's Mike Groff. He runs in 12th place right now, and he's had a spectacular season thus far. The team he drives for, Antonio Ferrari's Euro Motorsports, talking about 2 cars for next year. I hope that Groff is certainly one of the nominees.
Mike Groff has done a good job. We saw him many times on ESPN being successful and winning races in Super V and ARS. Now he's moved up to the Indy cars with Fendi and Peak sponsorship. This is an 89 Lola, so Mike Groff definitely making his mark here in his rookie season of IndyCar racing.
Mike Groff, there's another racing family for the moment. They've been very strong in the small formulas. Number 33 car, that's Guido Dacco. There's Jan Bikas as he works his way around the circuit as well.
Glad to see Dominic Dobson in Bruce Levin's car. We saw him off the road earlier on at turn 5. He got himself underway again with help from the corner workers. And we see Mario, as we said earlier on, bringing up the rear.
Now this full course yellow, of course, is as a result of A.J. Foyt, who went straight off the end of the first turn, and they are still working at the car with A.J. We'll give you an update as soon as it's given to us. The 31 car from the Personal Investment Group, that is Jan Bikas, a race driving instructor up at Monterey, California. Another young man who is really showing his skill this year and will move into contention, I'm sure, very quickly.
It's very difficult for a driver to have a situation like this where you don't go to all the races. It's very difficult to come and hope to be competitive. But we have seen Bikas on many occasions do a superb job in qualifying. So the people who set this car up obviously do a good job for him. This is a Judd-powered car he's in.
You take a look at the points fight under this full course caution mathematically. Al Unser Jr. will come away at 195 and Michael 151. Everyone else at the moment mathematically eliminated from the fight. We'll be back with more from Road America. Still under the full course caution for A.J. Foyt's accident. Fortunately, CART does operate one of the most comprehensive safety teams in motorsports today. Earlier, Gary Gerald got a chance to take a look at the CART safety team.
In the event of an emergency, either on the racetrack or in the pits, the CART safety and medical team has an extensive array of equipment to handle any situation in a most efficient manner. This safety truck, one of two at every track, is a rescue and fire truck rolled into one. The vehicle is manned by a doctor and 3 fire rescue personnel or paramedics. An extrication board sits next to the passenger in the jump seat. Compartments on the side of the truck house large and small saws used to cut through carbon fiber on the upper half of the tubs. In the rear are large cutters and spreaders known as the jaws of life, not used as much today as they were during the days of the aluminum tubs. Hoses attached to a 50-gallon water tank and foam fire retardant round out the rest of the equipment here. The right side has water and chemical fire extinguishers, as well as a burn blanket and a medical box. When the safety truck is on the track, a mobile ambulance patrols the pits, equipped with items needed for a medical emergency, including fire extinguishers, oxygen tank and masks. You'll find a backboard and cot, medical and cardiac kits, as well as a cardiac defibrillator monitor. In addition to all this safety equipment, CART has a mobile hospital. The 40 by 8-foot bus is an emergency room on wheels, containing everything from Band-Aids and Tylenol to plasma and chest tubes. Personnel are capable of handling everything from cut fingers to cardiac arrest. A computer keeps track of the medical history of thousands of CART participants. Racing, of course, can be dangerous, but it's also a sport that recognizes its dangers and is prepared to react to them.
Back under the full course caution, and with this full course caution, the strategy, the tactics within the teams are definitely being played, as several of the leaders have dropped in and out of the pits from time to time. Leader on the track right now, Roberto Guerrero. Michael Andretti should be effectively the leader of the race. Down in the pits themselves, they're working on the back of that fuel tank. Derek?
What they're looking at is how much fuel is left. What that is that's a sight tube. They can literally see and measure how much they've used and how much is left. It looks to me as if there may be some left in that tank. I just hope that Michael has enough.
All right, let's go back to Gary Gerald.
In the Penske pit, Danny Sullivan came in right on schedule, 33 laps complete. Of course, the full course yellow has been pointed out, helping them regarding fuel conservation. But for Emerson Fittipaldi, his team made a problem. They never got the fuel hose connected fully. Emerson didn't get the fuel that he needed to get. We expect he'll be back in shortly, Paul.
So Fittipaldi with a struggling afternoon in Wisconsin. Danny Sullivan made a stop. Bobby Rahal stopped, as did his teammate Al Unser Jr. Fittipaldi, as Gary Gerald noted, stopped, and Michael Andretti made a stop. Now, tactically, that should carry everybody to the end of the race, but now at the start-finish line, the red flag. They're going to stop the race here at Elkhart Lake. So the race will be stopped. The cars will come to the head of the main stretch. The yellow is carried far beyond what they had hoped. The red flag is being displayed. The race will be stopped, and then it will be restarted. This is because the medical crews are all at the A.J. Foyt situation, and this will delete some of the course coverage. They're not going to take the chance. Nick Finoro has the red flag. The field will roll to a stop. So at Elkhart Lake, A.J. Foyt in a serious accident. The red flag displayed, and the race comes to a halt. but it will come back to a restart. We'll be back with more. A.J. Foyt now is extricated from his race car just off the end of the first turn, and with all of the safety equipment that is parked there, they move him very carefully. An air ambulance is sitting only a few feet away. He will be moved directly to that air ambulance and then taken down to Milwaukee County General Hospital. Now, the report is that he is conscious, that he has suffered injuries to his lower extremities, and that's all we know at this moment. Several of those men there are doctors, they're physicians, they're experts in traumatic care and emergency care, as well as paramedics, extrication experts, and firefighters. We can see that some sort of intravenous solution is being used with AJ, and as soon as Dr. Steve Alvey, who has his back to us, is capable of giving us a report, we'll certainly take that report. As they move him over, he's seen some gesturing with AJ Foyt's hand. So they move him to the air ambulance now. Let's get a further update by going to Lynn St. James.
Thank you, Paul. I'm here with Walter Gerber, who is the team manager of the Haviland Texaco Bayside car. Walter, you were able to speak with Dominic Dobson during this unfortunate red stop, and Dominic was evidently right next to AJ on the incident in the racetrack. What did Dominic see?
Well, Dominic said he was on the outside and AJ was on the inside, and to him it looks like he just wasn't able to brake, or the brakes didn't work, and just went straight on and disappeared, obviously, and Dominic went around, and he couldn't really say any more than that.
Very unfortunate. Back to you, Paul, please.
Well, you can see it in the eyes of all of those here, the tremendous concern and admiration for A.J. Foyt. So now let's go down as we get an update on the race situation with all the cars stopped. Some concern in Danny Sullivan's pit. Here's Gary Gerald.
Well, there was concern on a couple of fronts. Both Emerson Fittipaldi, Danny Sullivan, when they came in, were unhappy that they had been called in a lap previous for the final top-off with fuel. They knew that it was going to take longer to get the course clear. They wanted to stay out so there wouldn't be any question about having enough fuel to get to the end of this race. Well, once they got here, then Chuck Sprague, the team manager for Penske, had the rule book out, and a question arose over positioning on the grid now and how many laps have been officially scored. We understand 34 laps are complete. That means 16 yet to go. That should be okay for fuel, but because they came in and made their stop on 33, there's a question about where they'll line up on the grid. Danny Sullivan, Chuck Sprague, some of them trying to get a solution. A few moments ago, they weren't very happy. We'll wait and see what happens as they start lining the cars up again now for a restart.
Well, Gary, the kart scoring computer is showing 34 laps complete, and this is the order of the top five with Roberto Guerrero at the front of the order, followed by Rick Mears, Mario Andretti, Ari Luyendyk, Michael Andretti. Then in sixth place will be Fittipaldi, Al Unser Jr., Bobby Rahal, Danny Sullivan, and Jan Bikus will round out the top 10. Now, during this stop, they have been able to work on some of these cars, so some of those people who were suffering some problems may have them corrected now. And what we really face is perhaps a 16-lap sprint to a finish, and some changes in the complexion of how these cars may be able to run to that finish. There is the air ambulance helicopter that sits off the edge of the first turn as they move A.J. Foyt to it at this time, and the wishes of everyone here, the best possible wishes, go with Foyt as they move him over toward that air ambulance for transport down. And you saw that the car, well, there it is. The whole front end is almost literally sheared off, whether through impact or through the rescue effort itself. Now let's go back down to the pits. Here's Gary Gerald.
Well, Paul, down here we've moved now to the head of the starting grid. Actually, the third car behind the pace car, Roberto Guerrero, as you indicated, is our race leader. Roberto, I know that this is important anytime to have an opportunity to be competitive, to win a race. A man looking for a job next year, that puts a little extra pressure, I guess, on you right now. Do you think that you've got an opportunity to win this event now?
Well, I mean, obviously the reason we're leading the race now is just the way the circumstances were with the yellow, and then they stopped the race. So realistically, we'll really soon be here, but we'll take leading a race any way we can.
After the kind of season this guy has had with all the disappointments and the tough luck trying to nurture a program along, he likes this spot right now, no question, Paul.
Well, this race has created some surprising winners. Hector Rabaque back in 1982, Jacques Villeneuve in 1985. Roberto Guerrero will start at the front of the field when the restart comes. We're back at the Texaco Haviland 200 at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, Road America, and here is the way the top 10 will line up as they are ready for a green flag. The engines have restarted. They're taking the scoring back one lap, and that will put Danny Sullivan, not Roberto Guerrero, at the front of the order, followed by Michael, then Emerson Fittipaldi, then Bobby Rahal, then Al Unser Jr. Rounding off the top 10, Guerrero, Mears, Mario Andretti, Arie Luyendyk, and Eddie Cheever. They work their way through the hurry down section. Race summary to this point with our full course caution. 9 cars sit on the lead lap, and the leader is Danny Sullivan. At a conclusion of 33 laps, the average speed way down at 107.36 miles an hour. Out of race thus far, Bobby right at the start, and of course A.J. Foyt, who is now being transported to Milwaukee County Hospital as a result of the injuries he suffered in his accident. We have an opportunity to get an update, as we promised you, from Dr. Steve Alvey of the kart safety team. He's with Gary Gerald. Gary?
And alongside now Dr. Steve Alvey, who's had an opportunity to be involved in the extrication process and making the preliminary assessments. What can you tell us about AJ, Doctor?
Gary, we're going to transfer him by helicopter to Milwaukee County General Hospital right now. He has badly fractured, both legs are badly fractured. He is awake and alert, talking, and there are no other apparent injuries right now. So he's on his way to Milwaukee, and we'll have a further report later.
We appreciate your time. Thank you.
And our prayers, of course, go with A.J. Foyt. He will be listed in serious condition initially, and then perhaps they can transport him further on to Indianapolis Methodist Hospital. Now, there was some controversy about the fact that they will move back one lap and start with actually lap 33. They've actually restarted, though they're under yellow. Kirk Russell is the Director of Operations, Technical Director, a steward here at the race for kart championship auto racing teams. Kurt, what's the thinking? What's the ruling?
The rule is that we revert back to the last lap prior to when we went red. That was the completion of lap 33. We're now coming up to start lap 35.
And you've also added 2.2 gallons of fuel to try and help these teams.
That's correct. We are coming up to complete lap 35.
All right, the green flag comes out. With 35 laps complete, Danny Sullivan leads the field on the run down. Eddie Cheever is just behind him. We thank Kirk Russell for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us here in the booth and give us that official update as Danny Sullivan now begins to work away from the rest of the field. Second in the order is that man, Michael Andretti, car number 3, who works around Eddie Cheever.
Now, you did give us the rundown of the top 10, but remember, there is lapped traffic interspersed between all these top 10 runners. We saw Michael Andretti just have to put a move on Eddie Cheever here, but the rest of the top 10 do have to make their way past lapped traffic.
Michael Andretti, a lap being completed now under the green, and as Michael moved around Eddie Cheever, of course, he is not running on the leader's pace. He's a lap behind. The contest is at the front of the field as you ride on board with Michael Andretti. And there, just ahead, is Danny Sullivan as Michael now tries to run him down. Let's get an update on the situations developing in the pits during the red flag. Here's Gary Gerald.
Paul, everybody had the opportunity to work on the red, so they all topped off with fuel. The feeling here, particularly for Chuck Sprague, Danny Sullivan, Tim Bumps, his crew chief, is that the decision was really a great one for them. Not only did it put them at the front, but remember, they were in that group that got 2 caution laps to start the race and then went 16 green flag laps. In this situation, 2 caution on the restart, 15 green to get to the checkered. They think without question they've got enough fuel to go the distance. Roberto Guerrero did dash in at the end of one of the caution laps. He did top off with fuel back on course. He's the only one we saw on pit road.
Well, Gary Gerald, let me ask you. The real question seems to be not any of these cars, but Al Unser Jr. He only went 14 laps before his first stop. Do you think he can run to the finish?
Rick Gallas told us the design was to make this a 3-stop race right from the beginning. That was their pre-race strategy. We asked him point blank, can you go the distance? He kind of shrugged and gave us one of those typical Rick Gallas looks that didn't tell us a whole lot. I think it could still be very interesting for little Al in his bid to clinch the championship.
Gallas, the gambler, as the Penske car, number 7 with Danny Sullivan at the wheel, comes across the line 2.5 seconds ahead of his nearest rival, Michael Andretti. Emerson Fittipaldi comes across in third. Bobby Rahal is there, just in front of Al Unser Jr., riding 4th and 5th place. The question is now, what about team strategy? Al Unser Jr. needs every point he can get. Would the order go out? Perhaps Derek Daly to Rahal. Let little Al by.
Well, little Al can be helped by his teammate right now. Bobby Rahal is ahead of him on the racetrack and in the points. We see him right here. We see an engine blow up right behind. We see some serious smoke. I don't know whether there's oil going down, but somebody in big trouble.
That's Dominic Dobson with the smoke at the back of the engine, and everyone else comes by safely. You have to worry because there could be oil coming in that smoke and laying down on the course. So Dominic Dobson should wisely get a fire there under the engine cowling. Shouldn't be anything serious, but you don't want to have any oil get down on that racing line.
We mentioned Rahal moving over for Emerson or for Alonso Jr. Remember the battle he is now in with Fittipaldi for third place.
And of course, Rahal would really like to pick up third place as he fights with Fittipaldi. You get a glimpse there from time to time of Al Unser Jr. running just behind. Now, Danny Sullivan, with the laps he's run, clinches the 1-point bonus for being the lap leader on the most points, but perhaps more importantly, it means he takes a point away from Michael Andretti in his effort to try and win the championship and take it away from Al Unser Jr.
Here we have a great shot of Rahal. He comes down the inside. Al Jr. tries to come down the inside. Rahal doesn't give him any room. A very difficult situation. We're inside Al Jr.'s car now, but a difficult situation for Rahal because there's a lot of money at stake in the points championship at the end of the year, and Rahal needs all the points he can get.
37 laps now complete, 50 laps the scheduled distance, 200 miles here at Road America. The indication all up and down the pitch, you heard the report from Gary Gerald, is that this will be a sprint to the finish, but then honesty is not something you necessarily expect out of the pits at this point, though that seems logical, Derek Daly. It would seem that most of them, if not all of them, can run to the finish.
That's right. Rahal still tries to find a way past the Budweiser car of Raoul Boesel. This is not a fight for position, but Boesel will not give way. So Rahal has his hands full trying to get the position, but Al Jr. is still behind him.
Michael Andretti continues his chase of Danny Sullivan. We focus on the battle for third. Fittipaldi, then an interrupt, Raoul Boesel, and then the battle between the teammates, Bobby Rahal and Al Unser Jr. Through Station 5, up under the Nissan Bridge. There, you almost begin turning before you see the corner. There comes Fittipaldi through.
Boesel is in 11th place. He is one lap down, but he will not let this battle through. So Rahal has Al Jr. still behind him, and there's Emerson Fittipaldi. Holds on to that third place.
The fight continues. The battle for third. Rahal lined up trying to catch Fittipaldi. It's where the points leaders are running right now. Of course, Al Unser Jr., the top of the points order, he's in 5th place. Michael Andretti runs in 2nd. Rick Mears is out behind Al Unser Jr., though back just a bit. Bobby Rahal, you saw him in 4th. And Danny Sullivan runs in 1st place. Now, that's the top 5 in the points, but the only two that truly matter right now are Al Unser Jr. and Michael Andretti in the points fight. I think for the most part, everyone else is mathematically eliminated.
We have a situation here now where Michael Andretti, who's chasing Sullivan, must make aggressive moves. However, with Al Jr., I don't think he can make very much aggressive moves on Rahal, because if he can't win this, he must take away points. So Al Jr. has to be a bit conservative.
You got a shot at Danny Sullivan, then Michael Andretti. Now here comes Fittipaldi. Cheever, Boesel, neither one in the fight. The fight now comes to us. Rahal, Al Unser Jr. and Rick Mears is closing in just behind. So the fight continues for third place. And Mears joins that fight as well. We've got a battle on our hands here at Road America. At the front of the field, it's still Danny Sullivan. On the second stretch, it's still Sullivan. The fight continues. Michael Andretti sits in 2nd place. Emerson Fittipaldi is 3rd. Rahal is 4th. Suddenly, without warning, Danny Sullivan slows on the circuit. His teammate Fittipaldi comes past him, as does Michael Andretti, and Danny Sullivan pulls by the wayside. A rattling sound in that Chevrolet engine. Chuck Sprague disgustedly turns his back on the pits. The Sullivan day is done. And just that quickly, he had this race totally under control.
This is hard to believe. The man who had the fastest car in the race here, both races, this 16-lap sprint also, he had time to work on the car during the long red flag situation, and Sullivan's car breaks. It lets him down.
Michael Andretti then flashed past, picking up the lead of the race. That brings Fittipaldi up to 2nd, brings Rahal and Unser up to 3rd and 4th. Rick Mears is now in 5th. So Michael Andretti has a solid first place over Emerson Fittipaldi.
He has a solid first place now, but he was not catching Sullivan. He was struggling to keep Sullivan in sight.
And Al Unser Jr. gets around his teammate Bobby Rahal, and Al Unser Jr. comes forward into third place. Now Mears is at the back of Bobby Rahal's car, and Mears is going to try Rahal. Mears gets past Rahal on the inside. So the positions change in this sprint, running to the finish now with 11 laps to go. Al Unser Jr. came forward. Hiro Matsushita, number 10, the Panasonic car, apparently with an engine let's go. He comes off the edge of the race course to climb out. Let's go to Gary Gerald, who's in the pits. Gary?
Well, the dramatic turn. There'll be no return championship for Danny Sullivan. They think it's something in the drive shaft, possibly the gearbox. That's all they're able to tell us at this point. But clearly the day is over. He won't be able to repeat. Paul?
All right, Danny Sullivan. What a terrible disappointment for Danny. At the front of the field, it's Michael Andretti, and at the start-finish line, not only are they advising the drivers that there's an emergency vehicle just ahead on the course, but that orange and yellow flag, the stripes, that tells you that there's a course condition. Usually on a dry day, it's oil just ahead to warn them that there might be a slippery patch. Now Rick Mears closed down. There's Danny Sullivan still in the cockpit of his car off the edge of the course as Mears closes down, trying to catch Al Unser Jr. The fight continues.
Last year, somebody else's bad luck. This man here, when he ran out of fuel, it handed the race to Danny Sullivan. We have an exact reversal of roles here. Danny Sullivan's bad luck now seems to be handing at least a good chance at victory to Michael Andretti.
40 miles to go for Michael Andretti. Still a very long way. We have seen this race change drastically for Danny Sullivan just in the last few miles. Remember a year ago when Michael Andretti was leading the race with just a mile to go, and suddenly he was out of fuel. Well, fuel should not be a problem today, though I'd say Derek Daly, they're right on the edge.
They are right on the edge, and now we see Emerson Fittipaldi look at Mears, try to have a look down the inside of Al Jr. This is a good battle for third place.
Al Unser Jr. has third. Rick Mears closes up right behind him, using superior speed, it appears, on the downhill run. But under braking, Al Unser Jr. is able to scoot away. Now through Harry Downs, heading down toward the carousel. Here comes that battle for third place. Al Unser Jr. setting up. Down through the gears into the corner. Rick Mears closes in just a bit. Now remember, we'd indicated earlier in the race, Rick Mears was incredibly fast through this section of the carousel. Will he be again as he closes on Al Unser Jr.?
Extremely fast he was here. The carousel most resembles an oval track, and we know how good Rick Mears is here. Through this kink at 160 miles an hour, Mears was consistently the fastest car. I think Al Jr. knows that, and will keep an eye on those mirrors there.
Al Unser Jr. just ahead of Rick Mears as Rick tries under braking to get under. Al Unser Jr. can't do it, maintains his position.
Mears, one of the most experienced drivers on the circuit, not known to make overly aggressive moves. So Al Jr. knows his style and knows that if he maintains those tight lines, Mears is not likely to chop down the inside.
The fight for the moment has broken off between Little Al and Rick Mears at the front of the field. It is Michael Andretti who picked up the lead when Danny Sullivan's automobile went away. We'll be back with more after this. We're back at Road America, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. I'm Paul Page with Derek Daly, Gary Gerald, and Lynn St. James. You ride with the leader of the race, Michael Andretti. What a turn of fates for this young man. He was trying to chase down Danny Sullivan when suddenly something happened on Danny's car, and Michael assumed the lead. He is now moving into a key position in the points fight as well, because Michael can still win the IndyCar championship. And this is exactly what he has to do that. Stay out in front, win this race. Al Unser Jr. was running back in third place with Rick Mears chasing him. That fight continues as well, but here is Michael Andretti out in front, running skillfully. Fittipaldi is in second place and trying to chase him down. Here's Danny Sullivan. They've now towed his car back to the paddock area, and he stands alongside Roger Penske's transporter. A terribly disappointed man. He had this race in hand. The defending champion out, and out very suddenly. Speeds are moving very quickly now. They're up to 125.8 miles an hour. Michael Andretti has 3 seconds ahead of Fittipaldi, but Fittipaldi's closing down. There's Rick Mears. Just ahead of Mears now is Eddie Cheever. And you see that Rick Mears was able to get around Al Unser Jr. and pick up third place. So Jr. drops back to fourth. Let's go to the pits Gary Gerald is with Danny Sullivan.
And the man who won it, as we pointed out a year ago, suddenly, surprisingly, is out. And I know you're probably as mystified as everybody else.
Yeah, looks like something in the rear, maybe a drive shaft or something in the final drive. I didn't have any more drive in a weird place at the fast part of the tractor's going down the straightaway, and you know, I don't know what let go. Just real disappointed. We had them covered, and we didn't have any kind of fuel problem, and one of those days. I guess last year we had some luck, and this year we didn't.
Thank you, Danny. We'll see you in a couple of weeks in Nazareth.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
Danny Sullivan, whose name has been mentioned, connected to a number of team possibilities for next year, but as yet no specific announcements. 7 laps to go now for Michael Andretti. 8 times they've run this race. Half of those times, the race itself was decided in the last 7 laps. Well, that happened today. Fittipaldi is trying to close down on Michael Andretti. Rick Mears runs in third. Al Unser Jr. is now moving up to try and contest with Rick Mears. Then Mario Andretti, with his engine finally running well, is running through the pack and has moved up to 5th place. While at the same time, Bobby Rahal is apparently suffering some sort of problem and dropping steadily backward. Ari Leyendijk was able to just move around Rahal very quickly. Rahal is now 7th. Roberto Guerrero is in 8th place, and Eddie Cheever runs in 9th.
Sometimes you don't have to have the fastest car to win. I don't believe Michael has had the fastest car at all times here today, but the car that he has, he's driving it as hard as possible. Every time we see him exit corners, we see him drop those rear wheels off over the rumble strips, kicks up the dust and dirt, and makes the best of the package he has.
On board with Michael Andretti, you got a glimpse of Ed Nathman. The area is right there, the team manager for Newman Haas. He may love Michael out in front, but he's going to hate this part. Happy birthday, Ed. It's his 40th birthday. Now we've told everyone. Michael Andretti still in front at the Texaco Haviland 200. Back at Road America, here comes Michael Andretti over the hill, but closing the distance on him is Emerson Fittipaldi. Let's go to the pits for an update. Here's Gary Gerald.
Well, Paul, we're in the Gallus pit. We've checked on the problems for Bobby Rahal. They set the car up lean, and now they've had the luxury of fuel and being able to attack. It's not handling well. That's why he has not been able to go forward. They asked Rick Gallus about fuel situation for Al Unser Jr. He said it will be close. They think they're going to be all right to be able to get there. Remember, they went only 14 green flag laps before their first stop. Paul?
All right, you've seen the leader, Michael Andretti. There's Emerson Fittipaldi as he comes up and crests the hill. Bit over 3 seconds behind Michael Andretti. In third place now, it is Rick Mears. Not in contest with Fittipaldi as we take a look back. And Mears comes over the top of the hill and heads down through Hurry Downs, and just behind him is Al Unser Jr. So there's Mears, and there is little Al.
This is still a very close fight here. Emerson Fittipaldi is inching ever closer to Michael Andretti every lap that goes by. I'm not sure there's enough laps to make a decent charge, but he is closing that gap ever so slightly every lap.
And we ride really with the critical fight because Al Unser Jr. needs every point that he can get. And if he can get up and take third away from Rick Mears, that will help him just that much more. Now, to repeat, we've had a long red flag here at Road America as a result of a single car accident involving A.J. Foyt when he went off of the first turn and struck one of the earthen embankments. He was extricated from the car after a lengthy red flag. He was taken by air ambulance to Milwaukee County General Hospital. He was listed in serious condition with fractures of both of his legs. They will try and stabilize him, and then the indication is that he will then, if possible, be transported to Indianapolis Methodist Hospital, which has long been the favorite place, if there is such a thing, for drivers who have suffered injuries. Derek Daly, you spent a long time there, as well as a number of other of the IndyCar drivers. When they suffer such injuries, it's probably the best care that you can get.
It really is the best care, and if there's anything good to say about that incident is the care that the drivers have in situations like this is by far the best from the CART safety and emergency crews.
On board with Michael Andretti. Now we can get a further update. Here is Lynn St. James.
I've talked with the Newman Haas team, and they're very confident here. They've called for Michael to give his fuel reading. They are in very good shape as far as fuel goes. So Michael is running, I think, record-setting lap times, about a minute 53 seconds, and maintaining his lead over Emerson. So they're very confident down here in the Newman Haas pits.
Well, and not to throw a wet blanket on the whole situation, that, of course, was the report that we would have gotten about this time last year. And then Michael Andretti ran out of fuel on the last lap. So this race certainly is not over until the checkered is unfurled up on the pit straight. In fact, twice the lead has changed on the final lap. In 1982 with Hector Rabake, he passed Al Unser Sr. on the last lap. By the way, winning that race, it was also the only lap that Rabake ever led in the IndyCars.
And it was the most important lap to lead because so many things happen. And what's the saying? It ain't over till the fat lady sings. Well, the checkered flag takes the place of the fat lady here. And until you see that, anything can happen, particularly at Road America.
So now, Michael Andretti climbs the hill and begins the penultimate lap. Just 2 laps to go now for Michael Andretti. Can he hold on? The gap is closing. Emerson Fittipaldi has nicked 3/4 of a second off of Michael Andretti's lead. Let's go to the pits. Here's Gary Gerald.
Paul, just a quick reminder. Remember a year or so ago in Toronto, coming down to the last 2 laps, Fittipaldi stalking Michael Andretti. He closed up 12 seconds in the last couple of laps in that particular instance, and it was a real Donnybrook coming down on the final lap. That's what the Fittipaldi team is hoping can happen here, but still it's going to be tough here. And we also want to remember that Emerson hasn't been on the podium. He hasn't had a top 3 finish since Cleveland early in July.
But twice he's been at the top of the podium here at Road America. 2-time winner Fittipaldi. Michael Andretti has never won. Now, are you a believer in numbers? Well, Fittipaldi won in 86 and 88. What's the next combination? 1990.
He is inching closer. We see in our picture here, he gets ever closer every lap. Michael Andretti will be the hardest man and have the widest car on the racetrack if Fittipaldi does get close enough to mount a decent challenge.
Carl Haas writing for all he's worth on that pad, hoping his drivers around this track. He was so pleased with 1st and 2nd places at Mid-Ohio. Will he see his driver Michael Andretti come in front and inch that much closer to a championship? It is possible, but it will be disputed very much by Emerson Fittipaldi, who tries to close in. Michael Andretti should see the white flag the next time around.
This is the long back stretch that Michael has just completed. Now it seems here that he can pull away from Emerson slightly. When they get to the corners and the braking areas, it's where Emerson seems to close up a little bit.
We watch for Fittipaldi. There he is. He's just behind as they come up the hill once again alongside the pit entrance. In the pits, apprehension. There's Teresa Fittipaldi. Can her husband come past? The white flag comes out for Michael Andretti. It waves for Fittipaldi as well. Rick Mears will come across in 3rd place starting the last lap with Al Unser Jr. closely behind.
Without a mistake and a mechanical problem or a fuel problem, Michael looks as if he has the handle of Emerson Fittipaldi. But Emerson remembers what happened last year and hopes that Michael has not quite made the calculation, which is the mistake they made last year.
For Michael Andretti, his last time down towards Station 5 and through the woods. There comes that battle with Al Unser Jr. challenging Rick Mears. And little Al is right there coming to his favorite braking area. Is he close enough to maneuver? No, he's not. Fittipaldi comes up, continuing his chase of Michael Andretti on the last lap at Road America. A most unusual race, but it almost always is here at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin.
Michael is definitely putting the challenge to Al Jr. by winning the last 2 races. He said in an interview recently, all I got to do is win the last 5, and people joked. Now he's won the 2.
This is the crew. They're watching this picture right here, the onboard camera feed. Heading for the kink, out of the gravel pit. Down as fast as he can go, waiting till the last second to touch the brakes as he heads into Canada corner. A right angle right-hander. Fittipaldi not within striking distance at this moment. But there he is. He inches closer. Back up. He climbs an elevation once again. Out under the bridge for Michael Andretti. The Kmart Haviland Lola, Newman Haas, perhaps back-to-back wins. It's a final corner just ahead. Fittipaldi maintains position as Michael Andretti begins to climb the hill now. And it'll be the checkered flag line just ahead for Michael Andretti. As Michael Andretti picks up the win here in the Texaco Haviland 200. Michael Andretti keeps his hopes alive in the points fight. Fittipaldi comes across the line in 2nd place. Here comes Al Unser Jr. up the hill. As Al Unser Jr. trying to grab a position away from Rick Mears and finish in 3rd place. But Michael Andretti is the winner. The points fight is still alive.
What a great day for Michael to come through the adversity, to take advantage of other people's problems. We saw last week at Mid-Ohio, took advantage of all the problems that other people had and some of his own. He comes through for 2 in a row.
So Fittipaldi pulls up to congratulate Michael Andretti. Back-to-back wins in the Indy cars, Mid-Ohio, and now here in Road America. And the fight for the points will continue on. We'll be back. Talk about the second generation. Michael Andretti and Al Unser Jr. have collectively won 11 of the 14 races this year. ESPN's coverage of the Texaco Haviland 200 has been brought to you by Robert Bosch Corporation, makers of the Bosch Platinum, the ultimate spark plug. By Quaker State, the Big Q is one tough motor oil. And by Energizer batteries. Nothing outlasts the Energizer. The winner's interview is brought to you by Road Handler, Treadlock Radials at Sears. Tough tires you can trust. Here's Gary Gerald.
And Michael Andretti, for the 5th time this year, comes out of the cockpit a winner. And I know the most important thing in your mind, this championship fight is still alive.
Yeah, this is, we're keeping it alive. We're doing everything we can to try to keep it going. The Kmart Haviland guys did a fantastic job in the pits. Every time I went out in front of the guy that I came in second with. So it was just a great race, My heart goes out to AJ. I hope he's okay.
The distraction with the long delay, any type of a problem from that time on getting reset for the final 15 green flag laps?
Well, I think Wally did a great job, good call in the way he redid the positions for the start because of the way the red flag headed up. So that gave us a shot at it. But I must say I didn't have Danny. Danny had us all covered today. So, he gave us this one. We gave him last year. So I guess we're even now.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Michael Andretti, victory number 5 in the season, keeping those hopes alive, Paul.
And his 14th of his career for Michael Andretti. As we look down through the entire field, Michael, Emo, Rick Mears, looking down through the entire top 10. We'll take a look at the entire field here. All of us certainly wishing the best to A.J. Foyt, that his hospitalization will be short, his injury's not serious, and his return very, very quick. For Derek Daly, Gary Gerald, Lynn St. James, I'm Paul Page. So long from Road America.